In the quiet town of Brenton, Oklahoma, police believed they'd seen it all until a chilling pattern began to surface. Men were falling mysteriously ill, each telling the same story about a beautiful woman with a haunting scar. What started as whispers of coincidence soon unraveled into a tale of vengeance, trauma, and secrets buried for decades. This is True Crimes Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. The police department in Brenton, a small town tucked away in Oklahoma, rarely faced anything out of the ordinary. Darius Mercer, a detective with more than a decade on the force, had long grown accustomed to the humdrum of local disputes, petty thefts, the occasional domestic quarrel, and the rare bar fight that spilled into the streets. That morning, he was staring at his lukewarm coffee while leafing through reports that barely held his interest when a firm knock landed on his office door. Sergeant Wilkins stepped inside, a folder in hand. "Detective Mercer, we've got another strange one," he said, placing the file on the desk. "That makes 3 in the past month. I think it's worth a closer look." Darius raised a brow and opened the folder, scanning the first page. It was a statement from a man named Jalen Brooks, 28 years old, who claimed he had been deliberately infected with HIV. He described the woman he had been seeing for 2 months, a striking figure, slender, with short curly hair and a faint scar etched above her right eye. Darius leaned back in his chair. "Unfortunate, yes. But how do you prove intent in something like this?" The sergeant shook his head. "That's exactly the problem. Take a look at these." He slid 2 more files across the desk. Darius flipped them open. Julian Price, 34. Eric Vaughn, 31. Both men recently diagnosed. Both describing nearly identical women. Different names, different introductions, but always the same look. Slim, brown-skinned, curly hair cropped short, the same scar. The detective's jaw tightened. 3 men, 1 pattern. He closed the folders with a sigh. "All right," he said, gathering the files. "I'll dig into it." Across town, Alyssa Ward was finishing up a long shift at St. Mark's Medical Center. She had been a nurse in the blood collection department for 7 years, admired for her professionalism and calm presence. Her colleagues saw her as steady, reliable, even kind. None of them knew about the storm raging beneath her composed exterior. "Don't forget the staff meeting Friday, Alyssa," the head nurse called as she walked by. "Of course, Miss Simmons," Alyssa replied with a practiced smile, never too wide, just warm enough. Leaving the clinic, she drove back to her modest apartment on the edge of Brenton. What no one around her suspected was that Alyssa had been living with HIV for 15 years, a secret she guarded with near religious intensity. It was not shame that silenced her, but a plan she had been nurturing for 3 long years. The moment she stepped into her bedroom, she went straight to the mirror mounted on the wall. Sliding it aside revealed what she called her wall of retribution. Photographs covered the surface, faces of men, names scribbled below them, dates inked in red. Some photos bore a slash through them, the word "finished" scrawled beneath. Others waited, untouched, their time not yet come. Alyssa pinned up a new edition, a man in his 40s, grinning in a suit, wrist adorned with a gold watch. Victor Langston, owner of a small construction company. She had met him the week before at the Blue Note Lounge and seen him twice since. They had already arranged dinner for the coming Friday at his home. She traced her finger across his smile. "Another one who will pay," she whispered. Meanwhile, in an office at the County Health Center, Dr. Monique Mercer, Darius's sister, was scanning the monthly reports of new HIV cases. As the town's lead epidemiologist, she kept close watch over disease trends in the region. What she saw troubled her. "Dr. Mercer?" Her assistant Tara poked her head in. "Here are the stats you requested." Monique flipped the folder open and frowned. The numbers were undeniable. In the past year, new HIV cases among heterosexual men between 25 and 45 had nearly tripled compared to previous years. Almost all were in Brenton and its surrounding communities. She tapped her pen against the desk, deep in thought. This sort of spike pointed to either several active spreaders of the virus or one determined individual with many partners. Either way, it demanded immediate attention. She picked up her phone and dialed her brother's number. "Darius, it's Monique. I've got something you need to see. Can you stop by this evening?" Later that night, Darius sat in his sister's kitchen, flipping through the statistics while sipping tea. "And do you think this links to the statements I've been getting?" he asked. Monique shrugged. "It's hard to ignore the overlap. A sudden rise among the same group, and 3 men already reporting deliberate infection. At the very least, it's suspicious." Darius rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Problem is, I can't just pull up medical records. Confidentiality laws don't exactly bend for police work." Monique leaned forward. "I can't hand you files, but I can let our counselors discreetly pass along your contact information. If any patients believe they were infected criminally, they can reach out to you themselves." Darius nodded slowly. "That'll help. For now, I'll focus on the 3 I've got. Maybe they crossed paths somewhere." The next day, Darius arranged to meet Jalen Brooks at a small cafe near the station. Jalen sat nervously, stirring his untouched coffee. "I met her on a dating app," he explained. "She called herself Tasha. We went out for about a month. Then she just vanished. Stopped answering calls, deleted her profile." Darius jotted notes. "Tell me more about her." Jalen bit his lip. "Slim, very pretty, short curly hair, that scar by her eye. She mentioned she worked in healthcare, but didn't say more. I didn't push it." "Any photos?" Darius asked. Jalen shook his head. "The few we took disappeared when her profile did." Darius later sat down with Julian Price and Eric Vaughn. Their accounts were eerily similar: short romances, sudden disappearances, and diagnoses weeks later. Back at his desk, Darius began assembling a psychological profile. This woman deliberately chose her partners, vanished after the encounters, and left them infected. The question was why? While he puzzled over motives, Alyssa was getting ready for her evening with Victor Langston. She picked her outfit carefully, striking a balance between understated and alluring. Her makeup was subtle, enhancing rather than transforming. From her dresser, she opened a small box and pulled out a faded photograph. A teenage girl, bright smile, eyes filled with innocence. Herself, 15 years ago, before the day that shattered everything. "For you," she whispered, setting the photo back in its place. At Victor's home, the evening unfolded as they always did: wine, warm laughter, a well-rehearsed charm. Alyssa was attentive, her most powerful weapon. Men loved to talk, to be admired, to believe someone cared about their ambitions. She offered that illusion with expertise. Dinner led to intimacy, and when it came to the bedroom, she was careful to ensure protection would not stand in her way. By morning, as Victor slept, Alyssa slipped out, leaving behind only a note with a number that would soon be disconnected. Another mark on her wall, another hollow victory. It was never joy she felt, only a fleeting sense of warped justice. That same day, a new report landed at Darius's desk. Samuel Bryant, 35, principal of the local school, now claimed he too had been deliberately infected by a woman he met 3 months earlier. The description was the same. Darius stared at his growing diagram. "This is no coincidence anymore," he muttered. That evening, he returned to his sister's office with the updated files. "Monique, I've got 4 now, all describing the same woman. Early 30s, healthcare background, scar over her eye." Monique sighed. "I can't hand you patient records, but I can discreetly ask around at local clinics." "That scar is distinct. If she's staffed somewhere, someone will know." Darius squeezed her hand. "I know I'm asking you to step over the line, but this is a crime, Monique. A serious one." She gave a solemn nod. "I'll see what I can find." 3 days later, she called him back. "Come by. It's not something for the phone." When Darius arrived, Monique looked grave. She handed him a file. "Her name is Alyssa Ward, nurse at St. Mark's. She's been HIV positive for 15 years. The scar, the description, the timing, it all fits." Darius studied the photo. An attractive woman, short curls, the faint mark above her eye. You're certain? Her diagnosis is documented. She's in treatment, her viral load nearly undetectable, which means she knows exactly what she's doing. Darius shut the file slowly, the weight of it pressing down on him. The only question left is why. What happened to Alyssa Ward 15 years ago that would drive her to this now? Calvin Rhodes sat motionless in the sterile office of his physician, the weight of the words he had just heard suffocating him. HIV positive. The phrase thundered in his mind, drowning out everything else the doctor said. At 35, with a thriving restaurant, a loyal wife, and dreams of starting a family, he suddenly felt as though the ground had opened beneath his feet. Mr. Rhodes, Dr. Parker said gently, with the right treatment, you can live a full life. Modern therapy is highly effective. Calvin's voice cracked. How do I tell my wife? It was the only question that mattered in that moment. The doctor's expression softened. Honestly, and as soon as possible, she needs to be tested too. When Calvin finally made it home, the Harlem Bistro owner parked outside his house for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. His wife, Vanessa, was inside, humming a tune as she cooked, the smell of seasoned chicken drifting through the air. Usually that sound brought him comfort. Tonight, it made the guilt unbearable. He stepped into the kitchen, his face pale. Vanessa, he said quietly, we need to talk. She turned, smiling at him, but the expression faded as soon as she saw his eyes. What's wrong? He swallowed hard. I got my test results. I have HIV. Vanessa slowly set down the spoon she was holding, turned off the stove, and faced him fully. How is that even possible? Her voice was calm, though her hands trembled slightly. I don't know, Calvin admitted, lowering his head. But I must have cheated on you. That's the only way. Vanessa didn't yell. She didn't break down. She sat at the table, her posture firm, her eyes steady on him. When? She asked. His throat tightened. 2 months ago. I was in Tulsa for that food conference. I met someone at the hotel bar. Her name? Vanessa pressed. I don't remember. He rubbed his face, ashamed. She said she worked in healthcare. She had short curly hair, a scar above her eye. Instead of rage, Vanessa's expression shifted into something colder, determination. She grabbed a notepad. Tell me everything you remember. Every single detail. Calvin stared at her. You're not leaving me? We've been married 7 years, Calvin, she said, her voice bitter but unwavering. Yes, you made a mistake. A terrible one. But walking away now won't fix it. What I need to know is who this woman is. If she knew she was infected and did this on purpose, that's not just betrayal, it's a crime. Over the next few days, their home became a command center. Calvin racked his brain, replaying that night in Tulsa over and over. Vanessa documented every detail he recalled. The way the woman held herself, the cadence of her voice, her habit of stirring drinks as if she'd done it 1,000 times. Vanessa called the hotel, asked about staff, and even reached the bartender. He remembers her, she reported, setting down the phone. Said she was there often during that conference. Curly hair, scar, always chatting with men. Calvin's stomach twisted. I can't even remember what she called herself. Melanie? Melissa? Something like that. Vanessa took his hand. Then we go to the police. You're not the first, Calvin. She's done this before. Reluctantly, Calvin walked into Britton's police station the next morning. Detective Darius Mercer met him in his office, jotting notes as Calvin explained everything. When he finished, Darius pulled out a folder and slid photographs across the desk. Do you recognize anyone here? Calvin studied them carefully, his pulse quickening. Then he froze. Her. That's her. I'm sure of it. He tapped a photo of Alyssa Ward. You're the 5th man to identify her, Darius said, closing the folder. Vanessa leaned forward, eyes widening. So we're not alone? Unfortunately, no, the detective replied. But we don't have enough to make an arrest yet. We need a direct link, phone records, financials, something to tie her movements to the victims. Vanessa's hand tightened around Calvin's. Then what do we do? We'll get a warrant, Darius said firmly. Leave it to us. As Calvin and Vanessa left the station, a flicker of relief mingled with fear in Calvin's chest. At least now it wasn't just his burden. Someone was listening. That night, Darius sifted through the growing pile of files. Calvin's testimony was critical. It proved Alyssa's hunt extended beyond Britain, reaching into Tulsa. If she was willing to travel, there could be countless more victims. His phone rang. Detective Mercer, he answered. Darius, it's Monique. His sister's voice came through, tense. I dug deeper into Alyssa Ward's medical records. There's something you need to hear. 15 years ago, when she was just a teenager, she was admitted to St. Luke's Hospital in Tulsa. She had multiple injuries consistent with assault. 3 months later, she tested positive for HIV. Darius gripped the phone tighter. Sexual assault? Yes. The report says she refused to name her attacker. The police opened a case, but it was closed for lack of evidence. So she was raped, infected, and silenced, Darius muttered, staring at the wall. And now, 15 years later, she's taking revenge. He exhaled sharply. But why now? What changed? That was the question that gnawed at him as he scribbled notes in his pad. Meanwhile, the warrant for Alyssa's phone and bank records came through. Darius combed through them late into the night, exhaustion tugging at his eyes. The data confirmed it. Alyssa had been in Tulsa at the exact time Calvin described, with a taxi receipt leading from the conference hotel back to Brenton. It was proof of her presence, but still not enough for an arrest. Evidence of intent was the missing piece. At the same time, Calvin and Vanessa weren't content to sit back. They launched an online support group under a false name, posting messages for men who might have been deliberately infected. Within days, 2 responses came in. Vanessa's eyes widened as she read the messages on her laptop. Both men are from Brenton. Both describe a woman who looks exactly like her. Calvin clenched his jaw. We need to tell Mercer. And we need to keep going. The more we uncover, the better chance the police have to stop her. But even as they strategized, Calvin found himself staring out the window, the dusk settling over Brenton. Why me? He whispered. Vanessa walked over, slipping an arm around his shoulder. It's not about you, Calvin. It's about her past. What kind of past justifies destroying so many lives? He asked bitterly. Vanessa didn't answer. There was no answer that could soften the reality. That same evening, in her apartment, Alyssa slid open her mirrored wall, her eyes scanning the collage of faces. 7 names already slashed in red, their tasks complete. 3 more photographs waited. She picked up the worn photo of her 15-year-old self, smiling bright and unbroken, and whispered to it, almost done. Just a little more.
If you're enjoying this video, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Share and like this video. It's free and won't cost anything, but it helps and encourages us to grow and do more. Thank you for your kindness, and back to the video.
At the Brenton police station, Darius Mercer laid out the evidence collected so far. 7 men had come forward, all with similar stories, all pointing to Alyssa Ward. Phone records and bank statements put her in the exact locations her victims described. It was a strong case, but he knew a judge would never approve an arrest without proof of intent. We need to catch her in the act, he muttered. Sergeant Wilkins leaned against the wall. What about surveillance? If she's out there hunting, we set up a sting. Darius shook his head. Too risky. I can't knowingly put another man in danger. The sergeant frowned. Then what? Darius tapped the stack of files. A search warrant for her apartment. If she's planning this, she'll have something there. It took 2 long days of paperwork and waiting before the warrant came through. In the meantime, Darius met with the 2 men Calvin and Vanessa had connected him to through their support group. Both described encounters that matched perfectly with Alyssa's pattern. Their statements bolstered the case, and by the end of the week, Darius and a team of officers pulled up outside Alyssa's modest apartment building. They entered quietly at dawn. The place was spotless, too spotless. Clothes missing, drawers half empty, signs of someone who had packed and left in a hurry. Darius cursed under his breath. She knew. But when he stepped into the bedroom, something caught his eye. The mirror on the wall seemed out of place. He pulled gently, and it slid aside, revealing a hidden surface beneath. His breath caught. The wall was covered in photographs of men, names scrawled beneath, dates of encounters marked in ink. Some had a red slash across them with the word, finished. Others still waited, untouched. My God, Sergeant Wilkins whispered. Darius lifted his phone and began snapping pictures. This is it. Intent. In the center of the wall, one photo stood apart. A younger Alyssa, barely 15, her smile radiant and innocent. Beneath it, someone had written in block letters, "Never forget." Darius stared at it for a long moment, the weight of her history heavy on his chest. Put out an APB, he ordered finally. She's dangerous, but priority is to take her alive. Hours later, when Darius returned to his office, he was surprised to find a man in a sharp suit waiting for him. He rose as Darius entered. Detective Mercer, Edward Carlisle, District Attorney. They shook hands, and Darius sensed tension immediately. The DA only showed up personally when politics loomed over a case. I hear you've got quite an unusual investigation unfolding here, Carlisle said, taking a seat. 7 cases of intentional HIV infection, possibly more, Darius replied, sitting across from him. We found her planning wall, but she's gone. Carlisle nodded. I'm aware, but I'm also interested in what lies underneath. 15 years ago, there was a case in Tulsa involving the assault of a minor. The victim? Alyssa Ward. The case was closed. Lack of evidence. He paused deliberately. One of the suspects was Charles Easton, a prominent businessman. Wealthy, well-connected. Darius leaned forward. You think it's connected? More than likely, Carlisle said firmly. 2 of her known victims have direct ties to Easton. One his former business partner, the other his cousin. Darius felt the pieces sliding into place. She's not targeting random men. She's going after Easton's circle. Carlisle's eyes sharpened. Exactly. Which makes this not just a criminal case, but a political bomb. Easton still has influence in Tulsa. If it comes out that the girl he allegedly abused is now infecting people connected to him, it could tear open old wounds. I don't care about politics, Darius shot back. I care about stopping her before more lives are ruined. Carlisle rose, straightening his suit. I admire your focus, detective. Just remember, when you find her, this will be more complicated than you think. When the DA left, Darius slumped into his chair and rubbed his eyes. Charles Easton. The name gnawed at him. He pulled the files closer, cross-checking victims against Easton's business and social ties. The pattern became clearer with each page. Nearly half of them were directly linked. Later that evening, he sat in Monique's office and laid out the connections. She's picking them deliberately, he told his sister. But how does she know? How does she trace Easton's people after all these years? Monique frowned. 15 years is a long time. She could have gathered information slowly, quietly. If she's determined, she's capable. Darius nodded. We have to find her, Monique. Not just to stop her, but to finally uncover what happened back then. Monique touched his arm gently. Be careful. If Easton is as powerful as Carlisle says, this could get dangerous. That same evening, Calvin Rhodes received a text from an unfamiliar number. Meet me tomorrow. Lakeview Park. 3 p.m. Come alone. You deserve to know the truth. His chest tightened. He showed Vanessa. She shook her head fiercely. No, you're not going. It could be dangerous. I have to, Calvin insisted. If this is Alyssa, it might be our only chance to get answers. To end this. Then we tell Mercer first, Vanessa countered. The next morning, they sat in Darius's office, showing him the message. He studied it carefully. It's probably a trap, but also a chance. You won't go. We'll set up an operation. One of my men will pose as you. The park will be under surveillance. Vanessa breathed a sigh of relief, but Calvin clenched his fists. I need to know why she chose me. What link do I have to her? Darius looked him square in the eye. Calvin frowned, confused. Easton? The construction tycoon? I met him a few times at business conferences. He's been to my restaurant in Tulsa. Why? Darius leaned back. We're exploring connections. Calvin and Vanessa exchanged a glance. Later that day, they left the station with unease heavy in their steps. Meanwhile, Alyssa was watching from afar. She had seen the couple enter the station, had guessed they would share the text. Lakeview Park was a diversion. She had no intention of showing up there. The real meeting she had arranged was set elsewhere, in a place no one would expect. Rain pattered steadily against the roof of the Brenton police station as Darius Mercer sat at his desk, reviewing the case file that had consumed his every waking thought. The failed operation at Lakeview Park gnawed at him. Alyssa had been one step ahead, clever enough to anticipate their moves. He stared at the photo of her wall of vengeance, the names, the red slashes, the chilling reminder of just how deliberate she had been. His phone rang, slicing through the monotony. Detective Mercer, he answered. Darius, it's Monique. His sister's voice carried urgency. I went back through the clinic records. In the past 3 months, Alyssa requested files on several patients, men. 3 of them are already on your victim list. Darius sat up straight. She used her access to identify them? It looks like it, Monique said. And there's one more name you need to hear. Elliot Easton. Darius froze. Charles Easton's son? That's right. 32 years old, running his father's branch office here in Brenton. She's already targeted his circle. If she's following her pattern, he's next. Darius grabbed his pen and scribbled furiously. Send me his address. We'll put surveillance on him immediately. At that same time, across town, Calvin and Vanessa were combing through his business contacts. Since Mercer's mention of Easton, Calvin had been digging through conference rosters, sponsorships, and press releases. He called Vanessa over to the laptop. Look at this. That conference in Tulsa where I met her? Sponsored by Easton Development. A month before, I consulted for a restaurant in Easton's new hotel. My photo was in the press release. Vanessa's eyes widened. She wasn't random. She was tracking you, Calvin. Following the connections. Calvin leaned back in his chair, his chest heavy. We thought it was chance, but she planned it. Vanessa put a hand on his shoulder. We have to tell Mercer. Calvin shook his head. I want to hear it from Easton himself. If his name is at the center of this, he knows what happened. Vanessa's jaw tightened. It's dangerous. Then we do it together, Calvin replied firmly. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. I've still got Elliot Easton's contact. We met at his restaurant launch. Later that day, at the Easton Development office in Brenton, Elliot sat at his desk reviewing quarterly reports when his secretary stepped in. Mr. Easton, Calvin, and Vanessa Rhodes are here to see you. They said it's urgent. Elliot frowned. He remembered Calvin vaguely from a restaurant opening. Send them in. Calvin and Vanessa entered the spacious office, the city skyline stretching behind Elliot's desk. Elliot rose, extending his hand. Mr. Rhodes, good to see you again. What brings you here? Calvin ignored the gesture, his voice low and steady. I need to ask about your father, about what happened 15 years ago to a girl named Alyssa Ward. The smile drained from Elliot's face. He slowly lowered his hand, returning to his chair. I don't know what you're talking about, he said flatly. And I don't see what this has to do with business. Calvin's jaw clenched. It has to do with my life. I'm HIV positive. I was infected by a woman deliberately targeting men tied to your father. You know her name. You know what happened. Elliot dismissed his secretary with a sharp glance, then sank heavily into his chair once the door shut. Alyssa, he whispered. tasting the name. Vanessa leaned forward. So you do know her? Elliot rubbed his face with both hands. I did. A long time ago. It was complicated. My father is not the man people believe he is. Then tell us, Calvin demanded. Elliot hesitated, his voice low. 15 years ago, I was 17. My father threw a party at our estate. Alyssa's mother worked for us as a maid. Alyssa was 15, naive, beautiful, too young to be there. My father invited his wealthy friends. There was drinking, drugs, and girls. Some willing, some not. Vanessa covered her mouth in horror. You mean, Elliot nodded, shame burning in his eyes. I didn't stop it. I didn't dare. I was terrified of him. Alyssa was taken into a room by several men, including my father. When she came out, she was broken. A few months later, it was discovered that one of those men was HIV positive. That's how she contracted it. The police opened a case, but my father paid people off. The file was closed. Calvin felt bile rising. Vanessa's eyes glistened with disgust. And you stayed silent all these years, knowing what happened to her? Elliot lowered his head. I was a coward. I still am. But if she's really out for revenge, then I may be next. She's already contacted me. We're supposed to meet tonight. At that very moment, in the police station, Darius received a report from financial analysts. Alyssa had withdrawn all her savings and purchased a bus ticket to Mexico, departing the next morning. But she had also booked a room at the Silver Star Motel for that very evening. She's running, Darius muttered to Sergeant Wilkins. But she's meeting someone first. The phone rang on his desk. Detective Mercer, he answered. Detective, this is Vanessa Rhodes. My husband and I just spoke with Elliot Easton. He admitted everything. He's meeting Alyssa tonight at the Silver Star Motel at 8 o'clock. Darius straightened in his chair. Are you certain? Yes. And he's willing to tell you everything about what happened. It's terrible, Detective, but you need to be there. Tell him not to confront her alone, Darius said quickly. We'll handle it. As the call ended, Darius turned to his team. This is it. We prepare for tonight. We end this before she disappears across the border. Evening draped itself over Brenton as the police positioned themselves discreetly around the Silver Star Motel. Its faded neon sign flickered, its parking lot mostly empty. Darius was stationed in the room next door, headset in place. Elliot Easton waited inside room 14, a hidden microphone under his shirt. His instructions were simple: stall her until the police moved in. At 7:55, a taxi pulled up. A woman in a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat stepped out, her movements calm and deliberate. Darius watched through the blinds as she walked straight to room 14. She's here, he whispered into his radio. Hold positions. Wait for my signal. Alyssa knocked. Elliot opened the door, and she slipped inside. Darius adjusted his earpiece, every muscle tense, listening to the conversation unfolding beyond the wall. Inside the quiet motel room, Alyssa's voice was the first sound to fill the air. Elliot Easton. 15 years have passed. Elliot shifted in his chair, his hands clammy, his voice low. Alyssa, I didn't think you would actually come. She gave a faint laugh, sharp and tired. I didn't have many choices left. The police are circling. This was the only way to speak before it's too late. In the next room, Darius Mercer listened through his earpiece, his heart racing. Alyssa knew she was being hunted, but did she realize they were outside this very door? Elliot's voice wavered. Why? Why are you doing this? These men, their lives will never be the same. Some had nothing to do with what happened to you. Alyssa's tone was steady, but her words carried the weight of fire. None of them were innocent. Your father was the one who destroyed everything I had. Not just him, his friends, his partners, the ones who covered for him. And you were there, Elliot. You saw. You turned away. His reply cracked at the edges. I was just a boy, Alyssa. I was terrified of him. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but fierce. And I was a child, 15 years old, when powerful men treated me like nothing. I walked out of that house carrying wounds no one could see, and months later I was told I would carry a sickness for life. Then I was warned to stay silent, while those men went on with their lives as though nothing had happened. The room fell into heavy silence. Elliot lowered his head. I've lived with that guilt for years. I remember your face that night. I never forgot. Alyssa's laugh was hollow. And yet you lived under your father's roof, enjoying his money, his influence. You tried to soothe your conscience with charity, community events, pretending to care. But nothing can erase what was done. Elliot leaned forward, his hands gripping his knees. I tried, Alyssa. I really did. She cut him off with icy calm. You think donations undo years of torment? You think public speeches balance out the fact that I was left alone with this pain? Do you know the worst part? It isn't the diagnosis. It isn't even what they did. It's that justice never came. The police, the courts, everyone turned their backs because the men who hurt me were wealthy and untouchable. Darius pressed his lips together in the next room, the truth of her words weighing on him. Elliot's voice dropped. So you decided to become your own kind of justice by harming others. Calvin Rhodes, who unknowingly moved money through his business for your father. Eric Vaughn, who helped keep witnesses silent in a cover-up. Samuel Bryant, who gave your father access to places where he should never have been. These men weren't strangers, Elliot. They were part of the same system, part of the shield that kept him safe. Darius's breath caught. She hadn't been choosing at random. Each target was carefully connected back to Easton. Alyssa's voice grew colder. And you? Do you think I came here tonight to harm you? No. I came to make you speak, to make you tell the world what your father really did, to tell the truth about that night. Elliot's eyes darted toward the floor. I can't. If I speak, he'll ruin me. Alyssa's jaw tightened. Then I'll ruin you. Not with illness, Elliot. With truth. The world will know what kind of man Charles Easton really is. Darius gave the signal. In a blur, the door burst open and officers flooded the room, weapons drawn, but voices firm. Police! Don't move! Elliot stumbled back, startled, but Alyssa stood perfectly still, calm as though she had been waiting for this very moment. Darius stepped forward and pulled her hands behind her back. Alyssa Ward, you are under arrest on suspicion of intentionally transmitting a serious illness. She didn't resist. She only turned her head slightly, her voice quiet but steady. I knew you would come, Detective. That's why I set this meeting, so that the truth would finally see the light. 3 months later, Alyssa's trial became the most followed case in Oklahoma. Each day, the courthouse was filled with reporters. When Elliot Easton testified, the entire state listened. For the first time, a member of the Easton family admitted what had happened so many years ago. Charles Easton himself was brought before the court, charged with crimes that stretched far beyond that single night. For decades, his money and connections had shielded him. That shield was now collapsing. Calvin Rhodes sat through every session, his wife Vanessa by his side. Though his own involvement with Easton's dealings was found to be unintentional, he carried the guilt like a stone in his chest. On the final day, Alyssa was allowed to speak before sentencing. She rose, her posture tall, her face unflinching. I am not asking for forgiveness, she began. I regret the pain I caused, but not the reasons I acted. For 15 years, I carried something I never chose. I lived with trauma that no one acknowledged, with anger that had nowhere to go. The system failed me when I was 15. Police, courts, society all looked away because those men had wealth and influence. I created my own justice. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, it was twisted, but it was the only justice I had. The courtroom was hushed. Even Darius, seated in the front row, felt the power of her words. "I am not a monster," Alyssa said softly. "I am a victim who became an avenger because there was no other way. If my punishment means the true offenders are finally exposed, then I will accept it in peace." The judge sentenced her to 15 years, one for every year she had lived carrying her burden. The press called it symbolic, but the case did not end with her. Charles Easton was indicted on multiple charges, and several of his associates followed him into the courtroom, their secrets dragged into the open. After the sentencing, Darius Mercer was granted a brief meeting with Alyssa before she was transferred to prison. They sat across from one another in a quiet conference room, the weight of everything between them filling the silence. Darius finally spoke. "You know, I couldn't have done anything else. The evidence was clear. I had to bring you in." "I understand, Detective. You did your job the same way I believed I was doing mine." His eyes softened. "What happened to you is unbearable. The fact that justice wasn't served back then is something I can't excuse. But your actions, they left behind pain that some didn't deserve." Alyssa's gaze sharpened. "None of them were innocent, Detective. Maybe not in the way you see it, but each of them played a part in keeping that system alive. Through their silence, their choices, their complicity, they protected men like Charles Easton." Darius shook his head. "Even if that's true, you had no right to turn yourself into judge and executioner." She looked at him for a long moment, her voice lowering. "When you're 15 and broken, and then you're told you'll carry an illness forever, your idea of right and wrong changes. I crossed the line, I know that, and I'm ready to face the consequences." As he stood to leave, she called after him. "Detective, there's something I want you to keep. Behind the mirror in my apartment, where you found the wall, there's a box. Inside is a picture of me at 15. Before all of this, I want you to have it. To remember that behind every so-called criminal, there might be a victim. And behind every victim, there was once a person who just wanted an ordinary life." Darius hesitated, then nodded. "I'll keep it." Outside the courthouse that day, he met Calvin and Vanessa Rhodes. Calvin's face was tired but steady. "So, Detective, justice prevailed?" Darius let out a long breath. "I don't know if justice ever truly exists. Maybe all we have are attempts to repair what's been broken." Vanessa's eyes glistened. She destroyed lives, no matter what was done to her. Darius nodded. "And she will pay for that. But so will the men who destroyed her life 15 years ago. For once, both sides will be held accountable." The three of them stood quietly, watching the gray Oklahoma sky as rain began to fall. The city of Brenton carried on as though nothing had changed, though within its quiet streets were stories of suffering, betrayal, and vengeance few would ever know. "What will you do now?" Darius asked Calvin. Calvin glanced at Vanessa, then answered simply, "Live. That's all we can do. Live, and try not to repeat the mistakes of the past." Darius placed his hand in his pocket, feeling the photograph of a young girl with a bright smile and trusting eyes. A reminder that every story begins long before it becomes a case file, that behind the headlines, there are wounds that never fully heal. And sometimes vengeance grows from the very place where justice was denied. Thank you for watching this story on True Crimes Altar. What are your thoughts on Alyssa Ward's choices? Was she only a criminal or also a victim of a system that failed her? Comment your opinions below. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from.